Honey, pour yourself a drink, make it a double, because the level of audacity I am about to serve you is going to make your blood pressure spike. I'm talking about the kind of unhinged, delusional, main character syndrome foolishness that you usually only see in bad sitcoms. But unfortunately for me, this was my actual life. You know that feeling when you think you've met a sweet, sensitive guy, but it turns out he's actually just a puppet controlled by a hive mind of pretentious narcissists? No? Well, let me educate you. My boyfriend, let's call him Caleb, stood up in front of his 5 best friends, clicked a laser pointer at a projection screen, and told me that they had collectively decided I wasn't brand compliant for his life anymore. Like I was a failed marketing strategy and not a human woman he'd been living with for a year and a half. I looked at him, I looked at his little peanut gallery, and I said my piece. And what happened next? Let's just say karma didn't just come knocking, she kicked the door down. Buckle up, bestie, because this tea is scalding. I'm Audrey, I'm 32, and I work in high-end art restoration here in Chicago. It's a very niche, very quiet job. I spend my days in a temperature-controlled studio, smelling like turpentine and varnish, meticulously removing centuries of grime from oil paintings to reveal the beauty underneath. It requires patience, a steady hand, and an obsessive attention to detail. I'm used to looking at things under a microscope and finding the cracks that nobody else sees. You'd think that skill would have helped me spot the cracks in my relationship sooner. But love makes you blind, stupid, and apparently willing to ignore a parade of red flags. I met Caleb about 18 months ago at a gallery opening. He was charming in that I read philosophy for fun kind of way. He worked in tech sales, but liked to pretend he was an undercover novelist. He had the thick-rimmed glasses, the perfectly disheveled hair, and a way of listening to you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We connected over a mutual hatred of the cheap wine they were serving. You know, he said, swirling his plastic cup, this tastes like it was aged in a radiator. Want to escape and get a real drink? I was charmed. I'm not going to lie, I was swooning a little bit. We went to a speakeasy down the street and talked until 2 a.m. He asked about my work, and unlike most guys who glaze over when I talk about solvent mixtures, he seemed genuinely fascinated. He asked about the ethics of restoration, the history, the chemistry. I thought, finally, a man with a brain who actually uses it. Those first 6 months, bliss, absolute bliss. He was attentive, he was sweet, and he seemed so cultured. We'd spend weekends at farmers markets buying organic kale we didn't know how to cook and judging people who bought pre-ground coffee. It was pretentious, yes, but it was our pretentiousness. We moved in together after 8 months. My condo in Lincoln Park is my pride and joy. I bought it with my own money, renovated it myself, and it's my sanctuary. Caleb's lease was up, and it just made sense. He moved in, bringing his collection of vintage vinyl and his pour-over coffee setup that took up half my kitchen counter. I didn't mind. I liked the noise. I liked having someone to come home to. But, and there is always a but, I should have noticed the third wheel in our relationship, or rather the 5-headed monster wheel. Caleb had this group of friends from business school. The syndicate, they jokingly called themselves, which should have been my first clue that they were insufferable. There were 3 guys, Julian, Marcus, and Topher, and 2 girls, Sloane and Becca. They were intense. They treated their friendship like a Fortune 500 company board meeting. They met every single Thursday for the summit. I thought it was cute at first. Friends staying close in their 30s, that's rare, that's admirable. But slowly I realized the summit wasn't just dinner. It was a performance review for everyone in their lives. I remember the first time I met the whole crew. It was at Sloane's loft, very industrial chic, very expensive, very cold. I walked in wearing a vintage floral dress I loved, and the way Sloane looked me up and down, it was like I'd worn a trash bag. Oh, Sloane said, sipping her martini. Audrey, Caleb said you were artistic. That dress is certainly a choice, very brave. I brushed it off. I thought, okay, she's just protective. But the grilling started immediately. So, Audrey, Marcus asked, leaning back like he was interviewing me for a junior analyst position. Art restoration, is that scalable? What's your 5-year growth strategy? Do you plan to franchise? I laughed, thinking he was joking. I don't really want to franchise, I said. It's a craft. I do the work with my hands. It's about preservation, not scaling. The silence that followed was deafening. They all exchanged these little glances, micro expressions of judgment, like I had just admitted I enjoyed eating dirt. Quaint, Becca whispered to Topher, loud enough for me to hear. If you're already feeling the cringe, honey, smash that like button, because I haven't even gotten to the part where they ruin my vacation. The red flag started waving vigorously about 10 months in. I noticed that Caleb couldn't make a single decision without consulting the board, and I mean nothing. We were picking out a new rug for the living room. I found this gorgeous Persian runner, antique, perfect condition, great price. I loved it. Caleb liked it too, but then he pulled out his phone. Let me just snap a pic and send it to the group chat, he said. Why? I asked. It's for our hallway. You live here, I live here. Why does Topher need to weigh in? They just have good taste, babe. I want to make sure it's a smart investment. 5 minutes later, the verdict came in. Sloan says the pattern is too chaotic, Caleb said, putting the rug back. And Marcus thinks it clashes with your aura. Let's keep looking. I stood there, blinking. My aura? Marcus is a hedge fund manager, Caleb. Since when is he an expert on auras? Don't be defensive, Audrey. They just want the best for us. That became the catchphrase of my nightmare. They just want the best for us. We planned a trip to Italy for our 1-year anniversary. I did all the research, found a stunning villa in Tuscany, booked wine tours, the works. I presented the itinerary to Caleb, so excited I was practically vibrating. He looked at it, smiled, and said, "Looks cool. Let me run it by the syndicate at dinner tonight." I stayed home that night because I had a headache, probably induced by the stress of dating a man-child. But he came home 3 hours later with a frown. So the guys think Tuscany is a little basic, he said, kicking off his shoes. Sloan says everyone goes there. She thinks we should pivot to a minimalist retreat in Finland. It's better for our personal brand. I don't have a personal brand, Caleb, I snapped. I have a passport and a desire to eat pasta. We are going to Italy. We went to Italy, but the whole time Caleb was miserable. He spent half the trip texting them, sending photos of our hotel room so they could critique the thread count of the sheets. He couldn't enjoy the sunset because he was too busy worrying if the filter he used on Instagram would meet Sloan's approval. I started to feel like I was the crazy one. Was I not ambitious enough? Was I too emotional? Was I holding him back from his destiny as a tech bro warlord? They made me feel small. They made me feel like my job was a hobby and my emotions were a liability. Every time we hung out with them, I felt like I was taking the SATs, but the subject was how to not be yourself. They'd ask me loaded questions about politics, economics, or obscure French cinema, and if I didn't have a dissertation-ready answer, they'd give each other those smug little nods. See, the nod said, she's not one of us. The breaking point, the absolute cherry on top of this toxic sundae, came last month. It was a Thursday. Caleb told me that the syndicate was having a special gathering at Sloan's place and that it was mandatory for me to come because they wanted to celebrate a milestone. I thought, okay, maybe they're finally accepting me. Maybe this is an olive branch. I put on my best black dress, did my hair, and tried to manifest positive energy. We walked into Sloan's loft. The lights were dimmed. The 5 of them were sitting in a semicircle on the imported Italian leather sofas, facing a blank wall. In the middle of the room, there was a projector set up on a coffee table. I froze. Are we watching a movie? I asked, clutching my purse. Sloan stood up. She was wearing a blazer, a literal business blazer. She didn't smile. Please, take a seat, Audrey, she said, gesturing to a single wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing the group. I looked at Caleb. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just shuffled over and sat next to Marcus. Caleb? I asked, my voice trembling. What is this? Just listen to what they have to say, okay? We've put a lot of work into this, he mumbled. I sat down. I felt like I was about to be interrogated by the CIA. Sloan picked up a remote control. The projector whirred to life. A title slide appeared on the wall in bold sans serif font. Audrey and Caleb, a strategic alignment review, Q3. I stared at the wall. My brain refused to process the words. Welcome, everyone, Sloan began, using a laser pointer to circle the date. We've called this meeting to address some critical inefficiencies we've identified in the partnership between Caleb and Audrey. Over the last 18 months, the board, she gestured to the friends, has been collecting data points, and we've reached a consensus that we feel is necessary to share. She clicked to the next slide. It was a bar graph titled Intellectual Stimulation versus Emotional Labor. As you can see, Marcus chimed in, while Audrey scores high in domestic comfort, cooking, cleaning, general support, her contribution to Caleb's intellectual capital has stagnated. The ROI, return on investment, just isn't there. I sat there, mouth agape. I looked at Caleb. He was nodding solemnly, like Marcus had just explained why stocks were down. Wait, I whispered. Is this a joke? Is this a roast? Please save questions for the Q&A portion, Becca snapped, tapping her notepad. Sloan clicked again. A pie chart. Time allocation. Audrey requires a significant amount of quality time, Sloan explained, using air quotes around quality time. This detracts from Caleb's networking opportunities and his ability to engage in high-level discourse with the group. We've calculated that since dating you, Caleb's attendance at optional social mixers has dropped by 40%. He's my boyfriend, I shouted, finally finding my voice. He spends time with me because he likes me. Or, I thought he did. Like is a subjective metric, Topher said smoothly. We deal in objective realities. The next slide was the worst. It was a bulleted list titled Compatibility Roadblocks, Lack of Ambition, Content with a Dead-End Job in Manual Restoration, Social Deficit, Fails to Engage Meaningfully with the Syndicate's Core Values, Aesthetic. Clash, there was a photo of my rug on the screen, the rug I liked with a big red X over it. Emotional volatility, prone to feelings rather than logic. I looked at the list, dead-end job, emotional volatility. Then came the final slide. It was just text, recommendation, immediate dissolution of partnership. The room went silent. The projector fan hummed. Sloan turned off the laser pointer and looked at Caleb. The floor is yours, Caleb, she said. Caleb stood up. He smoothed his shirt. He looked at me, and for a second I saw fear in his eyes. But then he glanced at Sloan and he stiffened up. Audrey, he said, his voice sounding rehearsed, we've decided, the group and I, that you're just not the right type for the trajectory I'm on. The data speaks for itself. It's not working anymore. We've decided, not I feel, not I think, we. He broke up with me by committee. He outsourced his breakup to a focus group. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my head was suddenly crystal clear. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. I looked at the 5 of them, sitting there with their expensive haircuts and their empty souls. I looked at Caleb, the man I had loved, standing there like a coward, hiding behind a PowerPoint deck. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You let your friends make a pie chart about our relationship. You sat there and let them critique my career, my personality, and my taste in rugs on a projector screen. We just wanted to be objective, Caleb pleaded. It's not personal. It is the definition of personal, you absolute walnut, I hissed. I walked over to the coffee table. I looked at the projector. You guys talk about ROI. You talk about value. I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. Here's some data for you. Caleb, you haven't paid your half of the utilities in 3 months. I buy all the groceries. I planned the entire Italy trip because you were too busy trying to impress these people who clearly just want to control you. And as for my dead-end job, I make more in a month restoring one painting than you make in a quarter selling vaporware software. The room gasped. Sloan looked offended. I turned to the group. And you 5? You're not friends. You're a cult. You're a sad little cult of insecure bullies who are so terrified of genuine human connection that you have to turn everything into a spreadsheet to make sense of it. You didn't decide I'm not his type. I decided I'm way too good for all of you. I grabbed my purse. Caleb, don't bother coming home tonight. I'll pack your vinyl and your pour-over kit. I'll leave it in the lobby. If you try to enter my apartment, I will call the police and I will show them this PowerPoint as evidence of your insanity. I walked out. I slammed the heavy industrial door so hard the walls shook. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry in the Uber. I got home, I poured myself a massive glass of wine, and I started packing. If you are loving this drama, make sure you're subscribed because the update I'm about to drop is going to make you scream. The fallout. That weekend was a blur of cardboard boxes and angry texts. Caleb blew up my phone about 20 minutes after I left. You can't just leave like that. We need to debrief. You proved their point about emotional volatility. Sloan is really hurt by what you said. I didn't respond. I changed the locks on Saturday morning, perks of owning the place. I packed his life into 20 boxes and stacked them in the lobby of my building with a note that said, "Assets liquidated." I texted him one time, "Your stuff is in the lobby. You have 24 hours before I call a junk removal service. Do not contact me again." He sent his dad to pick up the boxes. His dad, a nice man who had always liked me, looked at me with sad eyes and said, "I don't know what happened to him, Audrey. He used to have a backbone." "He traded it for a slide deck, Bob," I said. "He traded it for a slide deck." Update 1, 2 months later. The story spread. Oh, did it spread. You see, Chicago is a big city, but the young professionals circle is small. I told my friend Jenna, who told her friend who works in PR, who told everyone. The phrase "the syndicate" became a punchline in our social circle. People started calling Caleb PowerPoint Paul. I heard through the grapevine that he was mortified. Apparently, he tried to spin it that I was crazy and couldn't handle constructive feedback. But once people heard about the actual pie charts, they couldn't stop laughing. I was healing. I threw out the rug they hated, not because they hated it, but because it reminded me of them, and bought an even louder, more colorful one. I focused on my work. I restored a gorgeous 17th century portrait and felt more satisfaction in that one canvas than I did in a year with Caleb. One Saturday, I was at an architectural salvage yard looking for a vintage doorknob. Don't judge me, it's my thing, when a guy bumped into me. "Whoa, sorry," he said, catching my arm to steady me. "I was distracted by that terrifying gargoyle over there." I looked up. Tall, kind eyes, hands covered in dust. "It is pretty hideous," I agreed. "I love it." We started talking. His name is Julian. He's an architect, a real one, who designs sustainable housing, not a pretend one who critiques font choices. We talked for an hour right there in the dust. He asked me about my work, and when I mentioned the chemical solvents, he didn't ask if it was scalable. He asked, "Does it give you a headache? Because I know a great ventilation system." We went for coffee. We sat there for 3 hours, and here's the kicker. At one point, his phone rang. He looked at it. "Sorry," he said, "it's my buddies. They're trying to coordinate a basketball game." "Do you need to answer it?" I asked, feeling that old panic rise. "Do you need to ask them if this coffee date aligns with your Q3 goals?" He looked at me, confused. "What? No, I'm going to silence it. I'm on a date with a beautiful woman." He silenced the phone. He put it away. He looked at me. I almost cried right there in the coffee shop. Update 2, 6 months later. Things with Julian are amazing. It's easy, it's quiet, it's normal. His friends are these goofy, loud guys who drink beer and argue about sports. They met me, gave me a hug, and said, "Thank God he found someone who isn't crazy." No interviews, no charts, just pizza and bad jokes. But here is where the tea gets sweet. Last week, I was at a gallery opening for a client. I was standing there with Julian, sipping champagne, feeling like $1,000,000. And who walks in? Caleb, but not the Caleb I knew. He looked rough, his hair was messy, he had dark circles under his eyes, and he was alone. No syndicate. He spotted me. He froze. Then he started walking over. Julian stiffened beside me. "Audrey," Caleb said. He sounded desperate. "Can we talk?" "I don't have a presentation prepared, Caleb," I said coldly, "so I don't think we can." "Please," he said. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake. The group, they turned on me." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, did your Q4 numbers drop?" "It's not funny," he hissed, but he looked like he was about to cry. "After you left, they started analyzing me. Sloan said I was depressed and bringing down the group morale. They put me on a performance improvement plan. They literally stopped inviting me to dinner until I fixed my vibe. They're monsters, Audrey. You were right, they're a cult." "I know," I said. "I told you that." I miss you, he said, reaching for my hand. I miss us. I miss the apartment. I miss having someone who actually cares about me, not just my brand. Please, I cut them off. I'm done with them. Take me back. Julian stepped forward. He didn't say anything aggressive. He just put his arm around my waist and looked at Caleb with a mixture of pity and amusement. Hi, Julian said. I'm Julian, the new asset. I think you've been liquidated. Caleb looked at Julian. He looked at Julian's tailored suit, his calm confidence, the way he was looking at me like I was the most important thing in the room. You replaced me? Caleb whispered. I upgraded, I corrected. Significantly. But we had a plan, Caleb stammered. We had data. Go home, Caleb, I said. Go write a white paper about it. Security, who knew me because I work with the gallery, started drifting toward us because Caleb was getting loud. He saw them, turned red, and scurried out the door like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Final update, the karma I found out later from a mutual acquaintance what happened to the syndicate. Apparently, without a common enemy, me, to bully, they started eating each other. Sloan and Becca got into a massive fight over a guy, something about violating the sisterhood non-compete clause, and the group fractured. Marcus got fired from his hedge fund for something shady and lost his status. Topher moved back to Ohio. The board has been dissolved. Caleb is apparently single, living in a studio apartment, and posting sad philosophical quotes on LinkedIn about loyalty and leadership. As for me, Julian and I are moving into a new place next month, a brownstone that needs a lot of work. We're going to restore it together. He handles the structure, I handle the details. We didn't take a vote on it. We didn't make a slide deck. We just asked each other, does this feel like home? And we both said yes. So, to anyone out there whose partner needs a committee to decide if they love you, run. Run fast, run far, and don't look back. Because love isn't a group project and you are not a pie chart. So, let me ask you this. What is the most insane, corporate, or bureaucratic way someone has ever broken up with you? Tell me in the comments because I need to know I'm not the only one who has PTSD from Microsoft Office. And don't forget to subscribe.